They say drowning is peaceful, but they lied. This is the story of 38-year-old Evelyn Carter from New Jersey, a woman who sought solitude in the stillness of winter but found herself dragged into the abyss beneath the ice. What she witnessed was not the warmth of a glowing afterlife, but a hidden realm beneath the water, where terrifying creatures watched humanity, their hollow eyes locked onto the very thing we cherish most, our distraction. This story was shared with us by one of our followers. If you have experienced a near-death experience that changed your perspective on life, we'd love to hear it. Check the description below for our email, and we promise to share your story while keeping your privacy protected. For the sake of confidentiality, we won't be using the real names or images of the person who lived through this event. But make no mistake, the truth of what happened remains unchanged, and it will shake you to your core. Before we dive in, let me ask you, if you were shown a world beneath our own, a place where unseen forces are keeping us trapped in distractions, would you have the courage to wake up? Would you fight to break free? Or would you keep scrolling right into their trap? Let's uncover the terrifying story of Evelyn Carter and the warning she brought back from the other side. The moment Evelyn Carter's foot touched the ice, she should have known. There was something unnatural about the way the lake stretched before her. Too still, too silent, too empty. The cold air bit at her skin, but there was another kind of cold creeping in now. Something deeper, something unseen. A whisper of danger in the wind. She should have listened. The 4-hour drive to the remote cabin had been exhausting. The roads were treacherous, winding through endless forests of bare, skeletal trees. Each mile that passed had pulled Evelyn further from civilization, further from the buzzing, flashing world that had consumed her. That was the point. She had come here to escape. Her life had become a never-ending loop of stress and exhaustion. She worked long hours, barely slept. Life is not balance. Things are not moving fine. This is not what I thought my life would become. And the only thing that filled the empty spaces in her mind was the constant glow of her phone screen. Scroll, like, share, repeat. She had spent years drowning in digital noise, watching strangers live their lives while she wasted hers. She told herself it was harmless, that everyone did it. But deep down, she knew better. She wasn't living anymore. She was just existing. She had come to the lake, to be alone, to breathe, to remember what real life felt like. But standing here now, in the freezing silence, she wasn't so sure she had made the right choice. The frozen lake stretched before her, a perfect mirror of the sky. She had seen pictures of people ice skating on lakes like this, laughing, carefree. That wasn't what she felt. She felt watched. Evelyn shook off the unease. It's just your mind playing tricks on you. She took a deep breath and stepped onto the ice. One step, the surface held beneath her boots. Another. She exhaled slowly, mist curling in the air. Maybe this was what she needed. The silence, the stillness, the isolation. Maybe this was where she would finally find herself again. She took another step. Then a crack. Her stomach dropped. A thin black fracture raced outward from her boot, spiderwebbing beneath her feet. Her breath caught in her throat. Not good. She turned, slowly, trying not to panic. Another crack, but louder this time and closer. The ice trembled beneath her, shifting just enough to send a surge of terror through her chest. She took a cautious step back, then everything collapsed. The water ripped the air from her lungs. A violent, shocking cold slammed into her like a brick wall, a million needles piercing her skin all at once. She didn't even have time to scream. The lake swallowed her whole, pulling her down, down, down into the abyss. Her arms flailed, legs kicking, but the weight of her soaked clothes dragged her deeper. She looked up, eyes wide in terror. The hole in the ice was still there, but it was already so far away. A jagged opening, mocking her, showing her the world she had just been in seconds ago. She reached for it, fingers stretching, lungs burning, but the current was too strong, and she was sinking too fast. Her heart slammed against her ribs, panic flooding every inch of her body. Don't stop fighting. Her fingers scraped against the ice above her, but it was too smooth, too slick. Her nails scratched uselessly against the surface. She tried to scream, But the second she opened her mouth, the water rushed in, burning, drowning. She coughed, choking, lungs convulsing as they filled with freezing water. Her body spasmed. No, this wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to die like this. The panic started to fade, not because she wasn't scared anymore, but because her body was shutting down. Her limbs felt heavy. Her mind grew distant. The hole in the ice was still there, but it was getting smaller and smaller. The world above seemed so far away, like it wasn't even real anymore. Her heartbeat slowed. Her vision blurred. Dark shapes shifted in the water. Something moved beneath her, watching, waiting. She saw them, just before the darkness swallowed her whole. The world above was gone, and so was she. She should have been dead. She felt herself sink, the freezing water crushing the last breath from her lungs. She saw the ice close over her, felt her body go limp, her heartbeat slow, her mind slip away into nothingness. And yet, she was awake. But she wasn't in the lake anymore. She wasn't anywhere. Evelyn gasped, expecting the violent burn of ice-cold water in her lungs. But there was nothing. No water. No pain. No weight in her chest. She wasn't drowning anymore. She wasn't even breathing. Her body. Was it even her body? Felt weightless, floating in a vast, endless void. A place with no walls, no sky, no beginning and no end. It was neither dark nor light. It just was. Her fingers trembled as she reached for something, anything, but there was nothing to hold on to. Hello? Her voice should have echoed in the emptiness, but it didn't. The silence pressed against her, thick and absolute. Then, and everything went white. The white light from the angel's touch had faded. Evelyn gasped. The void was gone, and in its place, a dark, endless world stretched before her. At first, she thought she was still drowning. It felt like she was underwater. The air was thick, the atmosphere heavy, a strange, crushing pressure surrounding her. But she could breathe. She looked down. Her feet were planted on solid ground, but there was no land. The floor beneath her was not earth, not stone, but something smooth and glass-like, stretching infinitely in all directions. It was black and reflective, like the surface of a frozen ocean. Above her, the water still existed, a ceiling of rippling liquid, separating this world from the one she had fallen from. She could see the jagged hole in the ice far above, distorted and shimmering, like a distant dream. But she was no longer part of that world. She was here now, and she was not alone. Evelyn's breath hitched. They were everywhere. Towering figures, grotesque, massive, inhuman, stood like silent statues in the distance, their elongated limbs hanging unnaturally, their hollow eye sockets staring blankly into the darkness. Their forms shimmered, shifting between solid and shadow, as if they didn't fully exist in this dimension. Some had clawed hands, long and bony, their fingers twitching as if hungry for something unseen. Others had no mouths, no faces, just smooth, featureless heads with only those hollow, sinking voids where their eyes should be. Evelyn's body locked up in terror. She wanted to move, wanted to run. But something in her knew better, because the creatures weren't moving. Not yet. They were focused on something else. Evelyn's eyes darted past the creatures, and what she saw shattered her soul. Rows and rows of humans, men, women, children, stood motionless, trapped in place as if frozen in time. They weren't shackled. They weren't tied down. They were just standing there. Their faces were pale, expressionless, drained of emotion, their mouths slightly open, but no sound came out. And in each of their hands is holding a phone. Evelyn's stomach twisted violently. They were scrolling, endlessly. Their fingers moved mechanically, swiping through empty content, their faces completely lifeless. They didn't blink. They didn't react. They didn't even breathe. They just kept scrolling, like puppets on invisible strings, like bodies with no souls. And the creatures, they were feeding. It wasn't obvious at first. The creatures didn't touch the humans. They didn't consume them physically. But Evelyn felt it. There was a pull in the air, something being taken. The longer the humans scrolled, the dimmer they became, like light bulbs slowly losing their glow. And the creatures, they stood over them, their hollow eyes locked onto the screens, and with every swipe, every video, every post, they absorbed it. Evelyn's chest tightened as realization slammed into her like a freight train. The humans weren't just watching their screens. They were being drained by them. Their thoughts, their energy, their very essence. All of it was being siphoned away, bit by bit, post by post, until there was nothing left. Evelyn's breathing became ragged. She turned to the angel, her voice breaking. "What is this?" she whispered. The angel's golden gaze did not waver. "The truth." Evelyn shook her head violently, backing away from the horrifying scene. "No, no, this isn't real. This is just a dream, a nightmare." She grabbed her own arms, squeezing them, trying to wake herself up. But she wasn't asleep. The angel's voice resonated again, deep and sorrowful. "They do not see their prison, Evelyn, but that does not mean it isn't real." Evelyn's heart pounded as she looked back at the lifeless humans, their fingers still scrolling. How are they here?" she choked out. "I don't understand." The angel's wings shifted, light pulsing from its form. "They never left." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "What?" The angel gestured toward the humans. "Their bodies walk your world, but their minds belong here." Evelyn staggered back, horror crashing into her like an avalanche. No, that's not possible." The angel's expression darkened. "It is not only possible, it is already happening." A sudden shift in the air. A coldness that wasn't just temperature, but something worse. Evelyn's skin crawled. The creatures, they were moving now. One by one, their hollow eyes lifted from the screens and turned toward her. Evelyn froze. The closest one twisted its neck, the bones making a sickening crack, except it had no bones. Its clawed hands tensed, the fingers twitching. The air became heavy, pressing against Evelyn's chest. The darkness itself seemed to be closing in. Evelyn felt it then. Not just the terror, not just the horror, the hunger. They had been feeding on distractions. But now, they had noticed her, and they wanted more. Evelyn's breath hitched in her throat. Her mind screamed, "Run." But the creatures were already moving. The first one lunged, its clawed hand stretching toward her. Evelyn screamed. And then, a blinding light exploded around her. The force slammed her backward, knocking the air from her lungs. The creatures howled, their screams a deep, guttural wail, as the angel's light pushed them back. The angel stepped forward, towering in full brilliance, its wings unfurling, burning with divine fire. "You do not belong here, Evelyn. It is time to wake up." And with that, the angel reached out, touching her forehead once more. The world collapsed into white. Evelyn turned to the angel, her body trembling, her breath shallow and uneven. The creatures were still there, watching, whispering, feeding, but they hadn't moved since the angel's intervention. Her mind was screaming for answers. She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who are they?" The angel's glowing eyes did not waver. "They are the unseen rulers of your world." Evelyn's stomach knotted. "Rulers?" She shook her head. That doesn't make sense. The world has governments, laws, people in power. You're telling me these things are in control? The angel did not blink. "They do not wear crowns. They do not sit on thrones. They do not declare war with armies. And yet, they have enslaved more souls than all the tyrants in history combined." A chill ran down Evelyn's spine. "They do not come in the night to steal you away. They do not attack you with violence. Instead, they keep you here, trapped, in a prison you cannot see." Evelyn felt a pressure in the air, a sound just beneath the threshold of hearing. She turned back to the rows of lifeless humans, still standing motionless, their fingers swiping through the endless scroll of content. Then she heard it. The whispers. Low, guttural voices seeped into the air, slithering like a venomous fog. They didn't speak any language Evelyn had ever heard, but she felt the words, inside her skull, inside her bones. They coiled around her thoughts like parasites, twisting, pulling, infecting. The whispers poured into the minds of the humans scrolling, feeding them commands they didn't recognize as foreign. Keep scrolling. Consume more. Don't think too deeply. Don't look away. Forget your purpose. Evelyn's breath hitched. She turned to the angel, horror crashing over her. They're controlling them. The angel nodded. They control more than that. Evelyn looked closer at the humans entranced by their screens. What were they watching? She stepped forward, her gaze moving to the dim glow of the content playing in front of them. At first, it seemed harmless. Videos, images, articles, streams of endless entertainment. But then, she noticed the patterns. Each person was watching something tailored perfectly to their weakness. One man obsessed with wealth was drowning in videos about greed, comparison, and luxury he would never obtain. A woman crippled by loneliness was being fed an illusion, fabricated love stories, empty validation, promises of happiness that would never come. A young girl buried in self-doubt was scrolling through perfectly curated faces, filters, and illusions, making her believe she would never be enough. A teenager full of anger was consuming nothing but rage, divisive, destructive content designed to keep him furious. Evelyn's chest tightened. It was all deliberate. None of them were choosing what they consumed. It was being fed to them. A slow, poisonous drip of control, engineered to keep them addicted, distracted, spiritually numb. They do not force the chains upon you, Evelyn. They let you shackle yourself. Evelyn took a shaky step back, her entire body trembling. This is insane, she whispered. Why? What do they get out of this? The angel's gaze darkened. The death of thought, the death of self, the slow decay of free will. The whispers in the air grew louder, pressing against Evelyn's skull. She covered her ears, but it didn't matter. The voices were inside her mind now. Keep scrolling. Forget the questions. Don't think too deeply. Just consume. Her breathing hitched. She felt it now. The pull, the numbing sensation that had trapped so many others. This was how it started. Not with force, not with fear, but with comfort. The illusion of choice. The illusion of freedom. Until, one day, you wake up and realize you never chose this life at all. You were led here, guided by them. Evelyn stumbled backward, her chest heaving. I need to get out of here, she gasped. But then, she saw something that shattered her completely. One of the humans, a man who had been scrolling nonstop, began to fade. Not in a dramatic, sudden way. It was slow, subtle. He kept swiping, but with each movement, his form became less solid, his body flickering like a candlelight in the wind. And the creature behind him, it leaned in closer. Its hollow mouth opened, and it breathed him in. Evelyn choked back a scream. The man was disappearing. His own soul, the light of who he was being devoured. And he didn't even notice. He just kept scrolling, kept feeding them, until there was nothing left. And then, the creature turned its hollow eyes toward her. A blast of divine light erupted, shoving the creature back into the abyss. Evelyn gasped, the pressure in her chest finally releasing. She turned to the angel, her voice breaking. I need to go back. The angel regarded her silently. Then you must wake up. Evelyn's pulse spiked. The whispers grew deafening, the creatures closing in. The angel reached out. But before you leave, you must remember this. If they control your attention, they control your mind. If they control your mind, they control your soul. Warn them. Evelyn's heart pounded. But they won't believe me, she whispered. The angel's wings flared, light pulsing through the void. That is not your burden to carry. Your task is not to make them listen. It is only to make them hear. Evelyn swallowed hard. She thought of her friends, her family, the people she loved, all caught in the same invisible chains she had once worn without question. She thought of the children, born into a world where screens raised them, where their dreams were stolen before they even knew they had them. She thought of herself, the years she had lost, the purpose she had forgotten. And she knew, if she didn't do this, no one would. Evelyn's fingers curled into fists, her jaw tightened. Her heart burned with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. She looked at the angel. Send me back. The angel smiled, but there was sadness in their eyes. They will not listen easily. You will be mocked, ridiculed, ignored. Evelyn lifted her chin, voice steady. I don't care. Evelyn felt the weight of those words press into her like an iron brand. The whispers became a roar, a desperate screeching wail as the angel's light exploded outward. And then, everything went white. She was in a hospital bed. The sound of monitors beeping frantically filled her ears. The scent of antiseptic and latex flooded her nose. Her vision blurred, adjusting to the harsh hospital lights overhead. She was back, alive, and she wasn't supposed to be. The room was frozen in shock. Doctors and nurses stood around her, their faces pale, eyes wide. A nurse dropped her clipboard. A doctor took a staggered step back, shaking his head. She was gone. One of them whispered. 15 minutes. No pulse. No oxygen. She was dead. But here she was, breathing. Her body ached, every limb feeling like it had been wrung dry. But none of it mattered. Her mind was still in the other world. The abyss, the whispers, the truth. And she had seconds before it would all be dismissed as a medical anomaly. Her eyes darted around the room until they landed on a familiar face, her sister. Tears streamed down her cheeks, her hands trembling as they hovered over Evelyn's. Evelyn, she choked out, voice broken. You. Evelyn didn't let her finish. She grabbed her sister's wrist, her fingers digging in with urgency. Put down your phone. Her sister's breath hitched. What? She asked, confused. Evelyn's hands tightened around her wrist. Please, just listen to me. We need to wake up before it's too late. Her sister hesitated, glancing at the phone sitting on the bedside table, its screen dimly glowing with notifications. What are you talking about? She asked, searching Evelyn's eyes. Evelyn's pulse pounded. The memories of the abyss, the creatures, the lifeless scrolling humans. It was all still so vivid. She had to make her understand. We're not safe, Evelyn whispered, voice raw. We think we're in control, but we're not. Her sister's brow furrowed. Evelyn, you just... No. Listen to me. Evelyn's voice rose, desperate. Her fingers dug deeper into her sister's wrist, as if that alone could anchor her to the truth. Her sister flinched. You're scaring me. Evelyn let go, running a shaky hand through her damp hair. She couldn't blame her for doubting. Who would believe her? A woman who had been dead for 15 minutes, now screaming about an invisible war for the human soul? The world had been designed to reject the truth, to mock it, to bury it beneath distractions. And that was the greatest trap of all. The doctors recovered from their shock and rushed to her side, checking her vitals, whispering about miracles and impossibilities. The medical team would spend days trying to explain her return. They would talk about oxygen deprivation, neurological misfires, a 1 in a billion anomaly. And no one would ask the real question. What if she had truly been gone? What if she had truly seen what was waiting beneath? Evelyn looked at the doctor adjusting her for, his face glowing in the reflection of his phone screen as he stole quick glances between procedures. She looked at the nurse texting under her desk, numb to the miracle happening before her. She looked at her sister, who, despite the fear in her eyes, had already reached for her phone out of habit. They were right back in the trap. Even now. Even after this. And Evelyn knew they wouldn't wake up unless someone forced them to. Evelyn's grip tightened into a fist. She wasn't supposed to be here. But she was. And that meant something. She met her sister's eyes one more time. Her voice softer now, but unshakable. I need you to trust me. Her sister hesitated. Then, slowly, she put her phone face down on the bedside table. Not off, not away, but down. It was a start. But the world needed more than a start. The world needed a wake-up call. And she was going to give it to them. Evelyn Carter's journey was not just about surviving death. It was about waking up from a prison she never knew she was in. She was given a second chance, not just to live, but to warn the world. Returning to the living, she did not waste a moment. She looked at her phone one last time and made a choice. She would no longer be controlled. She reconnected with her family, learning to be present in ways she had forgotten. She walked away from the distractions that had stolen her time, her thoughts, her purpose. But the truth of her experience never left her. She could still hear the whispers, the unseen forces trying to pull her back into the endless scroll. She saw it in the world around her, in the blank stares of people lost in their screens, in the way conversations were cut short by notifications, in the silent addiction no one wanted to admit. Evelyn made it her mission to wake people up before it was too late. She spoke to those who would listen. She fought against the pull of distraction, and she lived every moment fully aware of the battle she was in. A battle not against flesh and blood, but against an unseen enemy that thrived in the shadows of our attention. And now, the question shifts to you. How much of your life have you given away without realizing it? How many moments have you missed, thinking you had time to get them back? If you were shown the truth, would you have the courage to break free? Or would you keep scrolling, never realizing you were already lost? Evelyn's story is a warning, a wake-up call, because if we do not wake up now, we may never wake up at all. If his journey moved you, we invite you to share this video with others who may need a spark of hope. Like, comment, and subscribe to the Afterlife Chronicles to explore more incredible near-death experiences that uncover life's greatest mysteries. In our next story, you'll meet Daniel Reeves, a man who was struck by lightning and pronounced dead on the operating table. But during the 23 minutes he was gone, he saw something that changed everything he thought he knew about good and evil. What he encountered was not just the afterlife, but a battle between two realms, fighting over every soul on Earth. And the terrifying part? He wasn't sure which side was winning. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss it.